All right, aviators, welcome back to another live session here at the Finer Points. I hope you guys found us okay. We've been doing a little bit of moving around. We started out on our main YouTube channel, and now we're here on the Clips channel. And after the new year, believe it or not, we're going to have something even better and hopefully more permanent for you. So if you're not already on our mailing list, you should join it. First of all, you get a free gift video. And second of all, you'll be informed of things like where I'm going to be streaming in the new year, because we're committed to doing this once a month. All right, we're going to do this once a month so that we can get quality information out onto the internet. Tonight, we're talking the top 5 things all pilots should know. And I hope you guys are enjoying your holiday season. We're about 4 days away from Christmas here. So this is my Christmas gift to you, the top 5 things all pilots should know. Now, I know some of you have come to my top 10 talk at Oshkosh and other places. Hang in here. This one's a little bit different. The very, very first thing that I think pilots should know is a lot of what I'm going to say tonight is not necessarily about flying skills. Like here's, I was out on a lesson today and the guy that I was flying with was holding onto the yoke too tight. And I can tell you that one of the most important skills in flying an airplane is having a light grip. But that's not the kind of stuff we're going to get into tonight when we're only allowed 5 things. What are 5 things pilots really need to know? I'm going to focus on those things that actually make you safer, things that will cause you to always come home to your family. We're not going to talk through how to do the most perfect lazy 8, or as I said, hold the flight controls, but rather 5 things that I think you should understand about flying as an activity so that you always stay safe and come home. All right. And the very first one is this concept of bracketing safety. Now, I'm just going to give you an overview here because the very first stream we did this fall back in September was all about bracketing safety. So if you haven't seen that stream, definitely go to our YouTube channel and find it. You can catch yourself up there. But the basic idea behind bracketing safety is that over time, through the observance of accidents and the implementation of procedures, you can become perfectly safe. You can get better and better and better. And this is like some evidence of this is the commercial operators, right? Who over the last 30 years have reduced their fatal accident rate by over 80%, right? So how do they do that? And that's what bracketing safety is about. The very quick overview of it is that you should be paying attention to what accidents are happening out there. So when you're browsing around YouTube and you see a flight instructor reaction video or Juan Brown doing an accident analysis, or the Air Safety Institute doing a really great early analysis, those things Richard's doing, that's all really, really important information for you to look at, right? That because bracketing safety means you're going to watch that stuff, see what's going on out there in the real world, and then figure out how to modify your procedures in the airplane such that the accidents you're watching are never even possible for you, right? You've eliminated that possibility through procedures. And this works. Not only does it work, this is probably the largest lever commercial operators have to pull in terms of becoming safer and safer and safer over time. And partially it's because the companies survive the accidents, right? So in GA, the pilot often dies. That's the end of it. We go out there next month. We maybe never heard about it, so we repeat the same mistake. Bracketing safety prevents us from repeating the same mistakes. All right. And so these procedures that we're going to talk about in number 2 here, because the idea of bracketing safety is that you figure out procedures that prevent you from making mistakes. The procedures that we're going to talk about are numerous, right? So I'm going to give you some examples, but these procedures that you develop out of seeing what's going on out there in the world are too many to go through here tonight. So let's just start with a few. I'll give you an example of how this works in a procedure you already know. You probably already do. The final walk around after your pre-flight, right? Your pre-flight is complete. You finish the whole thing. But when it's all done, before you get in the airplane, you do a final walk around to make sure you didn't leave the fuel caps off or the gust locks on or the tow bar on the nose wheel or the tie down chains or the pitot cover or who knows what else, right? And so that one procedure, walking around the airplane, will catch all of those little mistakes that I just said, right? So how this works together is maybe that you looked at the accident reports, you thought, oh, look at that. There's a guy that took off with his fuel cap totally off. How would you do that? I don't know. Maybe he came to the airplane, did his pre-flight, inspected the fuel, got down, called the truck or whatever happened. He forgot to put the cap back on. that final walk around will catch that mistake. So let's talk through some procedures like that. All right. We all know about the final walk around, but what are some other ones that I think are critical? And by the way, like I said, we don't have time to go through all of these, but they're all in our ground school app. So standard operating procedures is a chapter on the flight side of our app. Inside that chapter are all of these lessons. Okay. So these are all the procedures that I teach. These are all the procedures that I use. And many of these procedures are borrowed from a professional environment and distilled into our GA world so that we can achieve the same level of safety that our professional counterparts achieve. All right. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, I don't see any comments in the chat if I'm missing them, but if you guys have them, send them through the chat. I'm always happy to address them. That's why we're doing these live. Okay, so what are some other ones? Pre-takeoff briefing is one that I think is often left out, right? So often pilots will say to me when the run-up is complete, they're all set to go, their seatbelts are tight, their pens are clipped on, they're all good. They look at me and say, I'm ready to go. Which I always say, yes, I'm ready to go. And they key the mic and off we go, right? So take a moment like the professionals do to get in front of the airplane. My pre-takeoff briefing has 4 elements that I call sort of normal elements, which is visually identifying I'm at the correct runway, visually identifying the wind conditions, picking an abort point on the runway where if I don't have 70% of my rotation speed by that point, I'll abort, and then selecting what's 1,000 feet above the airport so that I'm aware of when I have 1,000 feet in the bank, so to speak, right? Like here in Grass Valley, 1,000 feet above the field is 4,500 feet. San Carlos, where I was flying today, 1,000 feet above the field is 1,000 feet, pretty much. So that changes a lot, right? And how many of you have taken off before only to realize, shoot, I don't remember where 1,000 was, and maybe you have to go look it up. So those are the 4 like normal elements. And then we talk through emergencies. What happens if I have a fire or failure on the runway? What happens if I have a fire or failure after rotation with runway in front of me? And what happens if I have a fire or failure after rotation with no runway in front of me? And during those emergency briefings, make sure that you're using muscle memory, right? That you're actually pushing and reaching and touching the things that you might have to touch if that's the next 2 minutes of your life. All right. And I guess the last thought on that too is my mentor really was, old Air Force guy, real experienced, grizzled pilot. You really used to make me say my engine is going to fail when I get on the runway. And when it does, here's what I'm going to do. If I get lucky and it doesn't fail, then I'll keep going. I'll rotate at 55 and so on, right? So I don't do it exactly like that, but the point is bring a very serious mindset to this process, right? Imagine that the next 2 minutes of your life don't include going wherever you're going to go for a hamburger, but rather include sitting in your airplane off the end of the runway with broken landing gear calling the NTSB, right? If that's going to be your future, are you ready for that? So that skeptical mindset will keep you alive. Another one that I would like to talk about is the flow checks and checklists. So this came up again on my lesson today. The pilot that I was flying with today actually said to me, somebody I didn't know very well either, by the way, I'm doing like a sort of a phase check kind of a thing. And the comment he made, and I'm not trying to pick on him, he was great. And, so if you're listening to this, not picking on you, everybody says this, but I want to use it as an example. The comment was something like, I'm not very good at using my checklists in flight, right? And that is so common. I mean, if I had $1 for every person that did the run-up checklist, put it in the side thing, and did not pull that thing out again until we either before landing or more often after landing. We land, we get off the runway, and then it's, where's my checklist again, right? So that's a huge disconnect. So we should be working toward a flow check and a checklist for every climb, level off, and descent. And there's only a finite number of possibilities there. So if you're a CFI, you can keep metrics for your student. You can say we did 6 climbs, and of those 6 climbs, you only did a checklist on one of them, right? Just figure out some shorthand for yourself to help keep track of that. But I think it's important for pilots to understand that without any awareness on those in-flight checklists, most folks are operating at around 10%. And it's not like it's just arbitrary, right? There was another moment in flight today where our magnetic compass was about 20 degrees off of our heading indicator, which is something that you catch in that flow check. And it wasn't caught because we weren't doing the flow checks. So those flow checks aren't just, do it because your instructor said to do it. It's the same thing with the walk around. If you do that flow check, there's a million little things that you can catch by simply remembering and backing up that one procedure. All right, and the last procedure I wanted to mention, because procedures save lives, is GUMPS, making sure that everybody's doing some kind of GUMPS check at least twice in the pattern before they land. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, power props, pumps, seatbelt security switches, whatever sort of before landing checklist mnemonic you have. GUMPS is the one that pretty much everybody uses. Try to do it twice in the pattern. I don't believe that there are two kinds of pilots, those that have had gear up landings and those that will. I don't believe that. I think we can do better. So this will help you make sure you're not landing with your mixture in the wrong spot, that you're not landing with your wheels up, that you've got carb heat where you want it, that your lights are on, your seatbelts are fastened, your passengers are ready, all of that good stuff. And again, there's so many more procedures that sort of fit into this procedures saves lives category. And it's an unlimited list. If something happens tomorrow and you guys call me and say, hey, Jason, you hear about that thing that happened in Tennessee? I think you should have a procedure that does X, Y, Z. I just might, right? It's a living thing. We might add bits to the procedures we have, and we might add entire procedures to what we do. All right, number 3, you guys, we're talking about personal minimums. When it comes to staying alive in the airplane, staying safe and coming home every night to your family, we've got bracketing safety procedures that result from that sort of bracketing that get us to perfection. And of course, the concept of personal minimums. But I want to drill into this a little bit because a lot of people don't know, how to set personal minimums or how to change personal minimums. And so let's look at it. When you finish with your CFI, you have a certain set of kind of what I call operational limitations. And I would divide personal minimums, by the way, into sort of 2 categories. You've got operational limitations, like the stuff your CFI gives you. You know, you don't take off and fly in a headwind greater than 15. You don't take off in a crosswind greater than 10, whatever it is. You know, if there's clouds below a certain level, whatever those actual operating limits are, just deal breakers. Think them through ahead of time in the comfort of your own home so that your mind is relaxed and you can logically convince yourself that this is the best way to do it, and write down what those operational limits are for you. But there is a different kind of category to personal minimums, like things like I don't fly with more than 2 non-pilot passengers, or I don't fly after working 7 days in a row, or I don't fly if I got less than 7 hours of sleep, or whatever it is for you. Knowing yourself, you've lived this long, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and maybe in a moment of sort of objective self-reflection in the comfort of your own home, you'll be honest and sort of design some limits for yourself, and hopefully then stick to them. The hardest part of adhering to personal minimums, by a long shot, by a huge margin, is forcing yourself to comply with them when it matters, right? It's easy to comply with it, when you're a 25-hour student pilot and the whole environment is about you learning this concept. It's much, much harder when you've got, a meeting with a high level executive the next day and you're trying to get to a certain location and your kids have a thing going on at school and your wife's calling you. There's a thing broken on the airplane. I mean, who knows what it is, but all of those stressors, that it's much, much more difficult to adhere and stick to the personal minimums that you've designed for yourself. But over time, let's say you're good at it, you're able to do that, you stick to your personal minimums, and over time you feel like you're becoming a better pilot. How might you go about changing those personal minimums? I just did a podcast where I was having this conversation with another instructor. So if you're behind on the audio podcasts, check out the website, learnthefinerpoints.com. There's a recent podcast that kind of goes deep on this, but there's a few ways you can think about changing it. I mean, of course, one way is if you accidentally sort of find yourself in a situation where you had to, for whatever reason, land in a headwind that exceeded your minimum. Like for that moment, you're a test pilot. I can't think of that scenario, but I don't know. You fly to some remote area in the middle of South Dakota. All forecasts say that the wind is going to be less than 15. But when you get there, it's 18 down the runway and there's nowhere else to go, nowhere else to divert. The safest thing for you to do is become a test pilot and see if you can stretch your limit three knots. Of course, that's one way. That's not the best way to do it. I think a much better way to change your minimums is to have flights like that where you're specifically meeting with a CFI, and you can hopefully have a relationship with a CFI that goes on longer than just a one-off, kind of thing, but it's somebody you work with fairly regularly so that they're kind of aware of what you can do. But make the mission that day about expanding those limits and see if you can plan around the weather. If you know, for example, that your crosswind limit is 8 and you think you can handle 10, or you think you can handle 12, or maybe you even think you can handle the max demonstrated for the airplane, right? You can do 17 knots on the side and still have decent landings. Find a CFI, find an airport with conditions that get you as close to that as possible, and go work in those conditions with an instructor next to you until you can prove to both of you that it's time to sort of raise those minimums. And you guys remember just a moment ago saying that the hardest part is compliance. We don't have much there. There's not a whole lot we can do. There's nobody flying around, no chief pilot looking over your shoulder. No one's going to fire you, maybe your wife, but no one really is going to fire you, right? And say, you can't do this anymore. So you have to be very, very careful with your personal minimums. There was a point there and I lost what it was. So adhering to the personal minimums is the hardest part. Oh, I remember. So we're looking for accountability anywhere we can get it. When you develop this list of minimums for yourself and you've written it down, make sure that you share it with your instructor. Hopefully this instructor that you have a relationship with. Make sure you're both on the same page and that instructor knows what your minimums are. It's not a ton of accountability, but it's some measure of accountability, right? Maybe in the back of your mind, you'll remember before you take off, in violation of your own contract with yourself. Maybe you'll remember, well, Dylan has my minimums, and gosh, if I go off the runway here, I have a lot of explaining to do. Just maybe that's some measure of accountability. All right, we're going to move on to number 4, which is flying is not like riding a bike. Sometimes people remember it that way, and it's almost insidious in this way where you'll remember yourself as good as you were on the last flight, but you're nowhere near that good anymore. Your skills decay constantly. So what can you do? What can we do to stay proficient and make sure that we're staying sharp and safe in the airplane? I like to sort of think about, well, first of all, there's 2 thoughts here. One is the whole list of procedures that we gave you in the flight section of the app is a ritual that is relatively simple, meaning the pre-flight example, you could remember, like I did, that you could forget the pitot cover, the tow bar on the nose, the tie down chain, the rudder gust lock, the whatever all the little things are, fuel cap. You could try to remember all that, or you could just remember, look at the airplane and do a final walk around, right? So in that way, it simplifies complex problems and helps you develop a ritual that is easy to remember, but acts as a safety net across the whole operation. So when it comes to staying proficient, make sure that you're getting in the airplane every time with that mindset. That when you walk up to the airplane, you're pre-flighting it sort of from a distance. And when you sit down in the airplane and your passenger sits next to you, you give them a briefing, and that you're doing those flow checks and checklists and all of that ritual. It has value for all the reasons we've talked about, but it also has value as a ritual alone, right? Just to sort of ritually transform your mind, right? The best example I use on this topic is like a uniform for a police officer or a soldier or something like that. You could ask any uniformed person what it feels like to take off the uniform. Like, it's hard to think like a cop if you're not wearing the uniform in a way. For me, I wasn't a cop. I went to private school, but I can vouch for it, right? If we were all wearing our dress code, we were there doing everything we were supposed to do. If I was allowed to come in a sweatshirt and sweatpants, everyone's chucking spitwads and throwing paper airplanes. No one can think like a student. There's a lot to the sort of ritual transformation that goes on. And if you're trying to cast away the stresses of your daily life and get your pilot mind on, this ritual is going to be a huge component to your proficiency. But there's more. I would suggest taking missions, planning little missions for yourself. And you can just design 2 or 3 really to cover kind of a wide variety of experience. But I'll give you an example of one such mission, right? If you're starting at a towered airport, go to a non-towered airport. If you're starting at a non-towered airport, go to a towered airport so that you at least get that experience. If possible, plan them so that they're sufficient distance from one another that you can get VFR flight following along the way, even if you haven't done it in a while, maybe more especially if you haven't done it in a while, so that now you're practicing communications at the towered airport, communications at the non-towered airport, and communications with TRACON, and you haven't really done anything yet, right? But you're getting all that in there. And we're going to make this journey to the next airport to do traffic pattern work. And when we're in the traffic pattern, we're going to start with a few basic things. We're going to do a normal loop around the pattern. The second time around, we're going to do a go around. The third time around, we'll do a full stop. Okay, so if you were doing anything other than a full stop, that make sure that third one's a full stop, and then start to mix in the other takeoffs: short field takeoff, short field landing, soft field takeoff, soft field landing, and then we can depart back for the home airport. On the way home, I would recommend power off stall practice to the first indication. If there's no need, you don't necessarily have to go out there and practice stalling the airplane. If that makes you nervous, that's totally fine. We're not out there to practice getting the wing to stop flying in this case. What you're really out there to do is refresh your mind on what it takes to initiate some sort of recovery if you hear the first indication or see the first indication of a stall. I think for the purposes of proficiency, that would be fine. Simulated engine failure and emergency descent, and then you're on your way home. So you've practiced two of the most critical failure modes that are possible for you, a cabin fire and an engine failure. You've practiced all that work in the traffic pattern, and you've done that critical sort of get up and go, clean up, add power, right rudder, clean up your flaps, and climb away from the situation in both the go around at the pattern and also in the power off stall recovery to the first indication. Thoughts on proficiency, you guys? We're going to do a YouTube series on that. So if there's something specific you'd like to see in the YouTube, then definitely let us know. And the last topic I want to get to before I sign off here is passengers are deadly. You can see that's my mother-in-law there in the right seat. She's not actually that deadly, but the concept here is that in many other endeavors similar to flying, like sailing, and sailing is one I know really well, so let's just stick with that. But it's common knowledge, and not just common knowledge, it's taught as part of the curriculum that as a skipper of a boat, passengers who don't know how to sail are a real hazard. And that in most cases, you're better off just telling them to sit down and be quiet if things get critical than getting them to help you. Most cases, right? So people will say, hey, can I help? Is there something I can do? It's usually easier just to get them out of your way than to say, yeah, run forward and don't fall off and grab that red line and throw it around the winch and tighten it up and release the line on the other side. I mean, it's just better to just get them to sit down. For whatever reason, in the world of aviation, we don't talk about this very much. But one particular experience comes to mind where I was picking up a Cirrus with a private owner. This is back in 2008. And we're coming back from Minnesota. It was before the Cirrus factory was down in Tennessee. And we're coming back from Minnesota. And long story short, it was nighttime. We should have stopped in South Dakota, but we didn't. We decided because the weather was so beautiful that we were going to push one more leg. And that last leg turned out to be night IMC in the Front Range of Colorado. I was picking up a little bit of ice. Like, things got tense fast. I had a lot of outs, but it was like the end of a long day. And all of a sudden I'm working hard, right? And my student, who's not even a private pilot yet, and also the owner of this airplane, is sitting next to me going, what can I do? Can I help? Is there something I can do? Do you want me to tune in the MFD? Do you want me to do this thing? And it's just like, actually, what I want you to do is just be quiet. Just sit there. I got this, right? So whatever you need to brief your passengers before you go when you're flying, make sure that you have a really solid passenger briefing up your sleeve, that you've thought through the things that you want to say. And this goes back to that practicing procedures up front, is that you're only going to be good at that if you're doing it fairly consistently. You're not going to make up a really good passenger briefing the day they show up. You're going to practice it with your CFI, your examiner, and yourself. And then you have something to say when somebody shows up. But also knowing how to get rid of them if they can't achieve that themselves. So if you guys don't already know where the isolation buttons are on the audio panel, to make sure that you can just go into your own head, cut them out, make sure that they know you're going to do that as part of your briefing, if it's possible. Sometimes I tell my passengers, I probably won't do this, But if I sort of put my hand up like that, it means I'm listening. Or if I hit a button up here and you can't talk to me anymore, I probably did that intentionally. So they just need to know what to expect. You guys, I think that gets us through our top 5 things that all pilots should know. There's a couple new ones in there. I didn't make it the top 10 things because anyone who's been to Oshkosh knows I never get through all 10. So I actually got through all 5, and we had just a minute to spare. So I don't see any comments. Let me just double check with Jacob and make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, you guys, remember that we have a free gift video at learnthefinerpoints.com and a free trial of our ground school app. So if there's anything that I said tonight that you find you want to hear more about, it's in the ground school app. And if you don't have an iPad, you can always email us at learnthefinerpoints.com. We will send you a free gift video. And I think that's everything. I hope you guys all have an awesome holiday season. Oh, there they are. Nerd Simpson. Thank you. I haven't seen you in a while. And awesome. Well, you guys, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. I'll see you in January. We're going to keep doing these once a month, but we're going to find a nice little tidy spot for them on our website. Make it easier. So thank you guys for being here, and enjoy your holiday week.